All right, let's talk about one of the biggest energy stories happening on the planet right now. We're not just talking about putting solar panels on roofs. We are going deep into how India is building, from the ground up, one of the world's most ambitious solar energy ecosystems. From the raw silicon all the way to massive gigawatt-scale power plants.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll zoom out to the big global picture. Then we'll dive right into India's unique and frankly enormous growth challenge. After that, we'll see why solar became the answer, meet some of the corporate giants making it all happen, and finally, we'll take an honest look at the challenges that are still ahead. Ready? Let's get into it.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to set the stage first. You have to understand that the entire world is at this huge turning point, trying to switch from the fuels that built our modern world to the ones that are going to power its future.
But look, for all the buzz about a green future, here's the reality check. Right now, over 80% of the world's energy still comes from fossil fuels. That creates this massive challenge, but also a huge opportunity, especially for rapidly growing countries that need to power their economies.
And that brings us straight to India, where the word growth is, well, electrifying. Literally. The scale of what's happening there is just hard to wrap your head around. Think about this. The Indian economy is expected to grow at a crazy pace, over 6% a year, all the way to 2030. Now, that kind of economic engine is incredible, but man, it needs a staggering amount of fuel to keep it running.
And this number? This is what it all comes down to, 780 gigawatts. That's how much power capacity India is going to need by 2023. It's almost double what they had in 2022. So the big question, the trillion-dollar question really, is how in the world do you generate all that power cleanly, reliably, and without breaking the bank?
And you can see it right here. This isn't just a slow, steady climb. This demand is accelerating. It's shooting upwards. We're talking everything from giant factories to air conditioners and millions of new homes. The old way of doing things, just building another coal plant, was simply not going to work.
So, with that massive challenge on the table, India placed a huge bet, and that bet was on solar. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just for environmental reasons. It's because the math, the pure economics of it, suddenly became impossible to ignore. This right here is the tipping point, the aha moment. For the very first time, the total cost to build and run a solar power plant in India actually fell below the cost of a brand new coal plant. All of a sudden, the green choice was also the cheapest choice. That was the economic green light for a full-blown solar revolution.
Okay, so solar is the answer. Great, but there was a huge, glaring problem. China dominates the global solar supply chain. We're talking over 80% of it. For a country like India, being that dependent on one single nation for its energy future was a massive strategic risk. It was a vulnerability they had to fix. They had to build their own.
So what do? Well, India's government didn't just sit back. They rolled out a really smart multi-part playbook. They created incentives to encourage companies to produce locally. They made quality control lists to favor trusted domestic brands, and they used tariffs to protect their new industry from a flood of cheap imports. The message was crystal clear: build it here in India.
Now, a huge part of this playbook is a strategy called backward integration. It sounds complicated, but it's not. The pizza shop analogy nails it. Instead of just buying your cheese and tomatoes from someone else, you decide, you know what, I'm going to grow my own tomatoes and I'm going to make my own cheese. That's exactly what India's solar companies are doing, taking control of their entire supply chain.
So, when we say the whole supply chain, what are we actually talking about? Well, it's basically this four-step process. You start by purifying silicon into something called polysilicon. Then you form these into big blocks called ingots and slice them into paper-thin wafers. Those wafers get turned into solar cells, and finally, you assemble a bunch of cells together into the finished solar panel. India's goal? To do all of this at a massive scale, right at home.
All right, so we've got the global problem, India's challenge, and the government's master plan. But who's actually on the ground, in the factories, making this happen? Let's meet two of the titans who are leading this charge.
So let's talk about two of the heavy hitters, Waaree Energies and Premier Energies. And just look at these growth numbers. I mean, wow. Their revenue is projected to more than double in just a 3-year span. These aren't small-time players. They are becoming absolute industrial giants.
What's really interesting, though, is that they're not just copying each other. They have two totally different playbooks. You can kind of think of Waaree as the aggressor, all about massive scale and becoming a global export powerhouse. Premier, on the other hand, is the integrator. They're laser-focused on the Indian market and mastering every single step of the process themselves.
So, let's dive into Waaree first. They're the big one. Already India's largest module maker and expanding at a pace that is just breathtaking. But the key thing to see here is that almost 60% of their business is international, especially with the US. They're not just thinking about India. They are playing on the world stage.
Now let's flip over to Premier. They're playing a completely different game. Almost all of their sales, 96%, are right inside India. Their whole strategy is to become the ultimate domestic champion, to be the go-to for anything that requires made-in-India content from start to finish.
Okay, so the ambition is huge, the money is flowing, the companies are building like crazy, but, and this is a big but, the road to becoming a self-reliant solar superpower is definitely not a straight line. There are some serious bumps ahead.
And these risks are very real. For instance, what if everyone builds factories so fast that they create a massive oversupply and crash prices? What if they just can't break that reliance on China for the most basic raw materials? Then there's policy risk. What if a new government comes in and changes all the rules? And maybe the biggest question of all, in a fast-moving tech space like solar, what if a new technology comes along and makes these brand new billion-dollar factories obsolete overnight?
Which brings us to the ultimate question, the one that ties this whole story together. Can these Indian solar titans actually build this self-reliant industry and do it fast enough to power their own country's incredible growth, while also becoming a major player on the world stage? It's a high-stakes gamble, for sure, and watching it unfold is going to be one of the great industrial stories of our time.